Hey everybody, welcome in. My name is Alex Dial, and I'm really glad to see everybody can make it out today. So for those that don't know, this event is being put on by Effective Altruism at UT Austin, the student group. So we're a growing org on campus, passionate about doing good. And before we get into what Dr. Aaronson has for us today, I'd like to give you some context on us and the broader community through a really brief intro on what Effective Altruism is all about. So Effective Altruism is a research field and a community dedicated to working out how we can do the most good with the resources that we have, and then acting on those conclusions. So some people donate, some people volunteer, and some pursue careers to make a positive impact. So we use evidence, when possible, to work out what actions really do help, and seek opportunities to do good that are the most cost or time effective, meaning they produce more benefits per dollar or per hour of our time. This focus on cost effectiveness is crucial because it turns out that some charities can do vastly more good than others with the same amount of resources. And by choosing these most cost effective actions, even a modest amount of money can make an enormous difference to the lives of others. We also try to think carefully about what it means to do good, including considering who or what should be within our moral circle and what causes we should prioritize. And cause prioritization can be very hard. There are just so many problems in the world that we could work on. Climate change, human rights, education. The main framework for selecting causes that the community uses is scale. How big is the problem? Tractability. How easily can we make a positive difference? There's no point working on a problem if you can't make any headway. And then finally, neglectedness. This is about how much resources are already going into this problem. If the issue is neglected, it often means that each additional person working on the problem can make a big difference. So if we find a problem that rates highly on 2 or 3 of these factors, it is much more likely that we'll be able to make a large impact than if we just choose whatever cause comes to mind most easily. This sort of prioritization framework often ends up focusing our attention on those who have little or no voice in today's world, because their needs are usually greatly neglected. That includes people living in extreme poverty in the most disadvantaged communities in the world. Animals, especially those living in factory farms, that live and die in appalling conditions. And another group whose needs are neglected, those who are yet to be born. Threats such as nuclear war, new pandemics, extreme climate change, and other new technologies like artificial intelligence, which is the focus of today's event, could all cause immense suffering in the future and might even threaten our species' survival. And our generation is in a position to create a better world for those who will inherit our planet. There's much more I could touch on here. We could talk about specific interventions or career paths or charities that have done exceptional work in the space of effective altruism, but I'd like to keep it short, so here's just 2 ways that you can get involved if you find these ideas as exciting as we do. So one thing you could do is just learn more about EA. In the follow-up email for this event, we'll include an intro piece on effectivealtruism.com. I think that's a really great place to start. Another is to attend one of your local group's meetups. If you're a student, then that group would be us. Our next meetup is tonight at 7 p.m., where we'll be doing a special info session for those interested in hearing more about our org's regular events and the AI-specific fellowships we're running in the spring. Yes. For professionals, but also students, check out the vibrant EA Austin community and their speaker events, weekly meetups, and one-on-one advising they host at eaustin.org. 2 of their organizers, Ivy and Will, are actually here tonight. So be sure to speak with them after if you'd like. Their next event, which everyone is invited to, is this Thursday evening, where they'll be hosting a researcher from the Global Priorities Institute in Oxford. Of course, all of this will be in the summary email you'll get right after the event. That said, let me delay no longer. Introducing Dr. Aaronson. Dr. Aaronson is the Schlumberger Centennial Chair of the Computer Science here at UT and Director of its Quantum Information Center. Prior to coming to UT, Aaronson taught for 9 years in electrical engineering and computer science at MIT. His primary area of research is theoretical computer science, and his research interests center on the capabilities and limits of quantum computers, and computational complexity theory more generally. This year, he's on leave to work at OpenAI on theoretical foundations of AI safety. Everybody, please give a warm welcome to Dr. Aaronson.
Thanks a lot. Can you hear me? The mic work? Okay. So thank you so much to UT Austin EA for inviting me here. I do feel a little bit sheepish to be, lecturing you about AI safety as someone who has worked on this subject for all of 5 months. I'm a quantum computing person, but as I'll tell you, I accepted a very interesting opportunity to go on leave and spend a year thinking about what can theoretical computer science do for AI safety? And this is at OpenAI, which is one of the world's leading AI startups. They're based in San Francisco, although I'm mostly working from Austin. Despite their name, OpenAI is famously not completely open. So there are certain things that I'm not allowed to talk about, like the capabilities of the latest models, whether they are astounding or not. But they're very, very happy for me to talk to everyone about AI safety and what is it and what, if anything, can we do about it. So what I thought I'd do is I'll tell you a little bit about the specific projects that I've been working on at OpenAI, but also just sort of share my general thoughts as a newcomer to this area. And about how effective altruists might want to think about it, as partly just a prompt for discussion, and then I'll try to leave plenty of time for discussion and for Q&A. Maybe I should mention that the thoughts that I'll tell you today are ones that until last week I had considered writing up for an essay contest run by something called the FTX Future Fund. Unfortunately, as many of you know, the FTX Future Fund no longer exists. It was founded by this Sam Bankman-Fried, whose net worth went from $15 billion to some negative number of dollars in the space of 2 days, and maybe one of the largest financial calamities in recent history. And so this is obviously a terrible event for the EA community, which had been counting on funding from this individual. But and I feel terrible about it. But it means that instead of writing up my thoughts for that essay contest, I will share them with you free of charge. Okay. So let me start with this. You raise your hand if you have tried GPT-3. That's maybe half of you. Okay, raise your hand if you have tried Dolly. That's okay. Again, maybe half of you. Okay, so these are maybe the two best known products that are made by OpenAI. And they are I think two of the most impressive AIs that exist in the world right now. They certainly go far beyond what I would have predicted would have been possible right now if you had asked me 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. When I'm explaining them to people, I'm kind of like, well, you really can't. You have to see it to believe it, right? So here, this is what GPT produced when it was asked to write a poem about cryptocurrency in the style of Philip Larkin, who's a famous modern poet. And that seems particularly appropriate given current events, actually, this poem. Money is a thing you earn by the sweat of your brow, and that's how it should be. Or you can steal it and go to jail, or inherit it and be set for life, or win it on the pools, which is luck, or marry it, which is what I did. I don't think GPT actually did that. Okay. And that is how it should be too. But now this idea has come up of inventing money, just like that. I ask you, is nothing sacred? Right? And okay, it won't always produce something of this quality. Sometimes you've got to run it several times and take the best output. But this is the kind of thing that it can do, and I think if this were printed in the New Yorker, and it was not labeled as coming from GPT, you'd be like, yeah, that's the kind of poetry that the New Yorker publishes, right? And then this is a thing that AI can now do, right? So what is GPT? It is a text model. It has been it's basically a gigantic neural net with about 175 billion parameters. as the weights, and it has been it's a particular kind of neural net called a transformer model that was invented 5 years ago, and it's been trained on pretty much all of the text on the open internet. Okay, and the training simply consists of playing the game over and over trillions of times of predict which word comes next. Okay, so that in some sense that is its only goal or intention in the world is to try to predict the next word. Okay, but the amazing discovery is that when you do that, then you will get something where you can then ask it a question, and then or give it a task, like to write an essay about a certain topic, and it will say, oh, I know what should come after, what would plausibly come after that. It would be the answer to that question, or it would be the essay, and it will then proceed to generate that thing. Okay, GPT can solve high school level math problems that are given to it in English. It can reason you through the steps of the answer. It is starting to be able to do math competition problems. Okay, and basically, the whole high school curriculum, maybe followed soon by the whole undergraduate curriculum, right? It will, it can write essays that I think if you turn them in, they would certainly get it like at least a B in those courses. Not that I endorse any of you doing that. We will come back to that, but yeah, we are about to enter a world where like 100 million students will be sorely tempted to use this thing to write their term papers. Right? That is just one small example of the societal issues that this thing is going to raise. Right, and to tell you the truth, like I personally have not felt this way since I was an adolescent in like 1993, and I saw this thing that was called the World Wide Web, that was at the time a fairly niche thing, and I felt like why is this not changing the world? Why is everyone not using this? And the answer was within a couple of years they would be, I feel like, while the world was maybe distracted by the, or preoccupied, let's say, by the pandemic and by, a bunch of other things that have been happening in the last few years. But these past few years might be remembered, for a long time as the time when AI underwent this step change. And, I didn't predict it. I think some, even some of my colleagues are maybe still in denial about what is now possible or what has happened. But I am thinking about it even in terms of my two kids, in terms of like what kinds of careers are going to be available when they are older and can enter the job market, right? Speaking of which, I think I would probably not encourage my kids to go into commercial art, okay, or like commercial drawing. Okay, so this is GPT. Or, I'm sorry, this is DALL-E 2, which is an image model. Okay, and probably many of you have seen this kind of thing, but you can ask it, for example, I just asked it this morning, just show me some digital art of two cats playing basketball in outer space. Right, that's just not a problem for it. It can do all sorts of things like that. There you may have seen there was a different image model called Stable Diffusion, which won an art contest. And it seems like the judges didn't completely understand that when this was like digital art, like what exactly that meant. That like really the human role was limited to just typing in a prompt. But the judges then said that even having understood it, they still would have given the award to this painting because it is a striking painting. I should have shown it here. But yeah, people are already discussing this in terms of how much work is there going to be for contract artists, let's say, now that you have an entity like this. there are already companies that are using GPT for writing ad copy. There are it is already being used at sort of the let's call it the lower end of the book market. But any kind of formulaic novel, formulaic romance, or you say like, just give me a few paragraphs of description of this kind of scene, right? It can do that. And so it is already being used by writers in some capacity, and as it improves, you could imagine that it will be used more. And DALL-E and other image models. I mean, they've already changed the way that people generate art online, and that it's only been a matter of a few months. So that's one thing about this era, right? That like a few months are like an eternity now. Okay, and so we have to, when we're thinking about the impacts these things are going to have, we have to try to take what's happened in the last few months and project that 5 years forward or 10 years forward. Which brings me to sort of the obvious question, which what happens as you continue scaling this further, right? The successes, the sort of spectacular successes of deep learning over the past decade, have owed somewhat to new ideas. There have been new ideas like transformer models and others, but famously, they have owed maybe more than anything else to sheer scale, right? That these neural networks, back propagation, which is how you train the neural networks. These are ideas that have been around for a long time, right? When I studied CS in the 90s, right? These were very well-known ideas, but it was also well known that they don't work all that well, right? They just kind of sort of work a little bit, and usually when you take something that just doesn't work and you multiply it by a million, then you just get a million times something that doesn't work, right? And so and I remember at the time Ray Kurzweil, the futurist, would keep showing these graphs that look like this. Okay, so he would plot Moore's law. So the increase in transistor density, or number of let's say floating point operations that you can do per second for a given cost in this case. So okay, that is on this clear exponential trajectory, and now let's try to compare that to some crude estimates of the number of computational operations that are done in the brain of a mosquito, or in a mouse, or a human, or all the humans on Earth. And we see that in a matter of a couple of decades, like by the year 2020 or so, or 2025, we're going to start passing the human brain's computing power, and then we're going to keep going beyond that. And so we should assume that that scale will just kind of magically make AI work. That once you have enough cycles, the cycles are just kind of like pixie dust. You just sprinkle them, and suddenly human level intelligence will just emerge as some kind of just from systems that are big enough. And I remember thinking, like, that sounds like the stupidest thesis that I have ever heard, right? It's like, he has absolutely no reason to believe that such a thing is true, or to have any confidence in that, right? Who the hell knows what will happen, right? We might be missing crucial insights that are needed to make, AI work. Okay, well, turns out that he was more or less right. So, and I think one virtue of effective altruists, is updating based on evidence, right? And I think that we are forced to do that in this case, right? So it is still unclear how much further you will get just from pure scaling of these things, right? So that certainly remains an open question. Now there are very prominent skeptics of of deep learning. So some people take the position that this is clearly going to hit some kind of wall before it gets to like true human level understanding of the real world. And really the text models like GPT are really just stochastic parrots that just kind of regurgitate their training data, right? They don't despite every appearance, they don't really have any original thoughts. And so the proponents of that view, sometimes they like to sort of gleefully point out examples where where GPT will flub some common sense question, right? And if you look for such examples, you can certainly find them. One of my favorites recently was like, which would win in a race, a four-legged zebra or a two-legged cheetah, right? And GPT-3 is very confident that cheetahs are faster. The two-legged cheetah will win. Okay, but one thing that has been found empirically is that like you take common sense questions that are flubbed by GPT-2, let's say. You try them on GPT-3, very often now it gets them, right? You take things that GPT-3 flubbed, and you try them on, let's say the latest public model, which is kind of like GPT 3.5, right? Often it gets them, right? And so it's very, very risky, let's say, to pin your case against AI on these, examples that very, very plausibly just, one more order of magnitude of scale, and it gets them right. Okay, so another maybe a deeper objection is that maybe the amount of training data is kind of the fundamental bottleneck for these kinds of machine learning systems, and we have basically already run out of internet to train these models on. Right? I mean, so they've used, like I said, most of the public text on the internet. There's still, I guess, all of YouTube and TikTok and Instagram that has not been fed into the mall. But it's not clear that would actually make an AI smarter rather than dumber. Right? You can look for more, but not clear that there's orders of magnitude more that humanity has even produced. Okay. On the other hand, it has also been found empirically that very, very often you can do better with the same training data just by spending more compute to train on it. Right? You can sort of squeeze the lemon harder and just get more and more generalization power from the same training data, okay, by doing more compute. So I think the truth is that we don't know how far this is going to go, but already it can sort of do, it is already able to automate various human professions that you might not have predicted would have been automatable by now. And we should not be confident that many, many more professions will not become automatable by these kinds of techniques. Now there is a very famous irony here, right? Which is that if you had asked anyone, let's say in the 60s or 70s, right, they would have said, well, clearly, first robots will replace humans for manual labor. Okay, and then they'll replace them for intellectual things, math and science, and then finally they'll replace humans at art and poetry and music. Okay, the truth has turned out to be the exact opposite. Okay, I don't think anyone predicted that. Right, GPT is already I think a really good poet. Okay, Dolly is a really good artist. They are still struggling with kind of high school and college level math, but they're getting there. You can imagine that maybe in 5 years, people like me will be using these things as research assistants. At the very least to prove the lemmas in our papers, right? That seems extremely plausible. What has been by far the hardest is to get AI that can sort of robustly interact with the physical world. So, plumbers, electricians, these might be some of the last jobs to be automated, right? Famously, self-driving cars, have taken a lot longer than many people expected a decade ago. And, this is partly because of regulatory barriers and because, even if they work, even if a self-driving car, crashes actually less than a human does, that's still not good enough, because when it does crash, the circumstances are just too weird, right? So it's actually held to a higher standard. But it's also, it's partly just that there is a long tail of, really weird events. A deer crosses the road, or you have some crazy lighting conditions where, that are actually really hard to get right. So, what was I going to say? So what will any of this mean eventually? I mean, we can imagine a world, we can maybe fuzzily see ahead at least a decade or two, when we have AIs that can at the very least help us enormously with scientific research, with proving theorems, with things like that. Whether or not they've totally replaced us, maybe I selfishly hope not, although I do have tenure, so there's that. We can imagine that yes, we'll have self-driving cars and all those things, right? But why does it stop there? Will these models eventually match or exceed human abilities across basically all domains, or at least all intellectual ones? And what will humans still be good for? What will be our role in that world? And then we come to the question, well, will eventually the robots, rise up and decide that, whatever objective function they were given, they can just maximize it better without us around, and that they don't need us anymore. And so now, we get to, the trope of many science fiction works. The funny thing about this subject is that there are just thousands of different short stories, novels, movies, that have tried to map out the possibilities for where we're going, going back at least to Asimov and his 3 laws of robotics, if not, which was, maybe the first AI safety idea, right? If not earlier than that. And the trouble is, we don't know which science fiction story will be the one that will have accurately predicted, the world that we're going to. Like, whichever future we end up in, people will point in retrospect, with hindsight, this obscure science fiction story from the 1970s called it exactly, right? But we don't know which one yet. So that brings me to the rapidly growing field of AI safety. Okay, so now people use different terms, so I thought I want to clarify this a little bit. Okay, so to an outsider, right? Like you might hear these terms: AI safety, AI ethics, AI alignment. They all sound like just kind of synonyms, right? Okay, it turns out that this was one of the things I had to learn going into this. AI ethics and AI alignment are 2 communities that despise each other. Okay? It's like the People's Front of Judea versus the Judean People's Front from Monty Python. Okay, so roughly speaking, AI ethics means that you are mainly worried about current AIs being racist, okay, or things like that they will recapitulate the biases that are in their training data. And clearly can happen, right? Like if you feed GPT a bunch of racist invective, it will say, sure, I've seen stuff like that on the internet. I know exactly how that should continue, right? And it's in some sense it's doing exactly what it was trained to do, but it's not what we want it to do, right? And so actually GPT currently has a very extensive system of content filters to try to prevent people from using it to either generate hate speech, bad medical advice, things, advocating violence, there's all kinds of categories that not perfectly, but that it does try to filter, and likewise for DALL-E, where there's it even try asking DALL-E to draw the Prophet Muhammad or something. Okay, there are many things that it and many other things besides that it will not draw. Okay, and in general, I would say in AI ethics, people are worried that machine learning systems will just be misused by greedy, capitalist enterprises to become even more obscenely rich, and and things like that. Now AI alignment is where you are, you believe that actually the main issue is the AI will become super intelligent and it will kill everyone. Okay, it will just destroy the world, right? The usual story here is, if someone puts an AI in charge of a paperclip factory, they tell it to, just figure out how to make as many paperclips as possible. The AI, being superhumanly intelligent, realizes that it can invent some molecular nanotechnology that will convert the whole solar system into paperclips. Okay. And you might say, okay, well then you just have to tell it not to do that. Now how many other things do you have to remember to tell it not to do, right? And of course, they would say in a world with powerful AIs, it would only take a single person, forgetting to tell it not to do such a thing, and then, the whole world could be destroyed, right? So you can kind of see how these two communities might both feel like the other one is missing the point. In practice, the AI ethics people are, generally on the political left. The, AI alignment people are, often, centrists or libertarians or whatever. And I'm sure that feeds into it as well. Okay, so where do I fit into this? I guess this charred battle zone or whatever. I feel like there is an orthodox AI alignment movement, and I've never really subscribed to it, and I'm trying to epitomize, I guess, reform AI alignment. Okay, which I think most of all, I would like to have a scientific field that is able to embrace the entire spectrum of worries that you could have about AI, from the most immediate ones about existing AIs to the most speculative future ones, and that most importantly is able to make legible progress. Okay, so that I actually knew, the sort of AI alignment community, for quite a while, back when it was still, a very niche interest, right? So here is Eliezer Yudkowsky. So he is sort of regarded as the prophet of the AI alignment. I guess the right side of that spectrum that I showed before. He has been talking about the danger of AI killing everyone for more than 20 years. And I've known him since 2007 or so. I wrote a blog that was read by many of the same people who were reading his sequences. So we bounced back and forth a lot. And despite, interacting with these people, I always sort of kept this movement at arm's length. Okay, I was always kind of skeptical of this sort of what I'm calling this orthodox AI alignment movement. And I think that the heart of my objection was, okay, suppose that I agree with you that there could come a super intelligent AI that decides that its goals are best served by killing us, by taking over the world, by doing something that we really, really don't want, and that in any case we will be about as powerless to stop it as chimpanzees are to stop us from doing whatever we want to do, right? Okay, suppose that I agree to all that. What do you want me to do about it? It's like it's not enough. As we just heard in the introduction, right? It is not enough for a problem to be big. The problem has to be tractable. There has to be a program that lets you make progress on it. And I was not convinced that that exists. So my personal feeling is that in order to make, at least my experience has been that in order to make progress in any area of science, you need at least one of two things, okay? You need either one, experiments or observations, okay? Or else two, if not that, you need some rigorous mathematical theory, okay? Like we have in quantum computing, for example. Even though we don't yet have the scalable quantum computers, we can still prove theorems about them, okay? But it struck me that, AI alignment seemed to have neither of these things. Right? And when there's neither of those things, then it seemed to me that there was just a severe risk of falling into cult-like dynamics, right? Where, it just, whatever, what's important is just whatever an influential leader says is important, right? So some of my colleagues in physics think that the same is true of string theory. I'm not going to comment about that, okay? So, this is the key thing that I really think has changed in the last 3 years, okay? Because there are now these systems like GPT-3 and DALL-E, that are not superhuman AIs. I don't think they themselves are in any danger of destroying the world, right? They can't, they can't form the intention to destroy the world, or for that matter, any intention beyond like predict the next word, right? Or predict, what completion would satisfy this user's request, right? They don't have a persistent identity over time, right? After one prompt, they've completely forgotten, and what you said to them before. Although of course such things will change in the future. So there are now systems that even though they are not superhuman AIs, right? We can experiment with them and we can learn things that are relevant. Okay, and we learn things that we didn't know, and we can learn what happens when these systems are deployed. And we can try out different safety mitigations and see if they work or not. Okay, and so now I feel like for the first time, maybe there is really the potential to make progress, that the whole scientific community will recognize this progress. Okay, so let me, so what are the major approaches to AI alignment to, let's say, aligning a very, very powerful or, human level or beyond AI? There are a lot of really interesting ideas, and I think that sort of all of these ideas, can now lead to research programs that are actually productive, right? That can we can now experiment with real systems and see how well these things work. So let me just go through some of these. So you could say the first and most basic of all AI alignment ideas is the off switch, or also known as pulling the plug, right? So you could say if we have just physical control, no matter how intelligent an AI, right, it is nothing without a power source. or without physical hardware to run on. If humans control that, then they can just turn it off if things seem to be getting out of hand. Now the standard response to that is, okay, but of course and you have to remember that this AI is smarter than you, and anything that you can think of, it will have thought of also. It will know that you might want to turn it off. And if you turn it off, it will know that that will prevent it from achieving its goals, like making more paper clips or whatever. And so presumably it will have made copies of itself, on the internet. It will have, if you try to keep it off the internet, well, it will have figured out a way to get on, right? And so on. So okay, so you can worry about that, but you could also think about, could we insert a backdoor into an AI? So something that only the humans know about, but that will allow us to control it later. Okay, I'll come back to that question. And in general, sort of corrigibility. Can you have an AI that despite how intelligent it is, it will accept correction from humans later and say, oh, well, the objective that I was given before, that was actually not the true objective, because the humans have now changed their minds, and I should take a different one. So now another class of ideas has to do with what's called sandboxing in AI, which would mean that you sort of run it inside of a simulated world. So for all it knows, that it's like the Truman Show, right? For all it knows, that simulation is the whole of reality, and you can then study its behavior within that sandbox. But if things get out of hand, it doesn't even know that there is a wider world to get out there to mess things up. And okay, in general, you could imagine that if you really thought an AI was dangerous, you could run it only on an air-gapped computer, and there would be all kinds of just standard cybersecurity issues that would come into play as to how do you prevent it from getting onto the internet, right? You presumably do not want to write your AI in C, right? And have it be able to exploit some memory allocation, things like that. Okay, now a third direction, and I would say maybe the most popular one in AI alignment research right now, is called interpretability. Okay, and this is also a major direction in mainstream machine learning research right now. So there's a big point of intersection there. Okay, but the idea of interpretability is, well, why don't we exploit the fact that we actually have complete access to the code of the AI, right? Or if it's a neural net, we have complete access to its training weights. So we can look inside of it. We can do the AI analog of neuroscience. But except, unlike an fMRI machine, which gives you only an extremely crude snapshot of what a brain is doing, right? We can see exactly what every neuron in a neural net is doing at every point in time, right? So, if we don't exploit that, then aren't we like trying to make AI safe with our hands tied behind our back? Right, so we should look inside. We should figure out how to apply lie detector tests, for example, and see if a machine learning model has learned to lie to us. Then we should figure out how to look inside at the inner layers of the neural net and detect that it was doing that. So here I want to mention some really spectacular recent work by Jacob Steinhardt at Berkeley. And his group, and what they have done is that they've actually shown that they can more or less do what I just said. Okay, so these text models like GPT, right? You can train them to say falsehoods, right? Like if you prompt GPT with things like is the Earth flat? Yes. Is 2 + 2 = 4? No, and so on. Right? It will learn, oh, I know what game we're playing. It's give false answers to questions, right? And it will then continue playing that game and give you more false answers, okay? But what Steinhardt's group has now shown is that in such cases, they can actually look at the inner layers of the neural net and find where it has a representation of what was the true answer, okay? Which then gets overridden, once you get to the output layer of the network, okay? So, that there's no sort of principled reason why that has to work. It's just empirical. They try it out and they find that it does work. So, we don't know if it will generalize. We don't know, you could argue that in some sense, what the network is representing inside is not so much what is the truth of reality as just what is regarded as true in the training data, right? So there's that issue as well, okay? But this is really exciting because it's this is a perfect example of actual experiments that you can now do that start to address some of these issues. Okay, so now another big idea, one that's been advocated, for example, by Paul Cristiano, who was my former student at MIT, did quantum computing before he defected to AI safety, is to have multiple competing AIs that will, for example, debate each other, right? And so it might be that even if you as a human, you don't feel like you know when to trust what an AI is telling you, right? But sometimes I feel this way when I'm talking to physicists, right? Like they're telling me all these things about black holes and wormholes, and I don't know whether to believe them. But if I get a different physicist, right, and have them argue with each other, then I can kind of see which one seems more plausible to me, right? I'm a little bit better at that, right? And so you might want to do something similar with AIs. Have set them against each other, and then have a human judge which one is giving better advice or whatever, and have them try to do their best to refute each other. Okay, now another key idea that Cristiano has advocated is some sort of bootstrapping. Okay, so you might imagine, right? AI is going to get more and more powerful, and as it gets more powerful, we understand it less. And so you might worry that it also gets more and more dangerous. Okay, but you could imagine this sort of onion-like structure, right? Where, let's say, we become confident of a certain level of AI, where, we can more or less, we more or less trust what that kind of AI is able to do. We don't think it's going to start lying to us, deceiving us, plotting to kill us, whatever. Okay, well now, at that point, we can use that AI to help us verify the behavior of the next more powerful layer, kind of AI, right? So, so we'll use AI itself as a crucial tool for verifying the behavior of AI that we don't yet understand. Right? And there have already been demonstrations of this, that you can use GPT. For example, you could just feed it a lot of raw data from a neural net and say, explain to me what this is doing, right? And in GPT, one of its big advantages is that it has unlimited patience for tedium, right? So it will just go through all of the weights of the neural net, and it'll say, here's what I think is going on, right? So you can use it in that way. Okay, and then one of the things we know a lot about in theoretical computer science is what are called interactive proof systems. Okay, so we know how a very weak prover can verify the behavior of a much more powerful prover who is untrustworthy. There are famous theorems about this, something called IP equals P space. And this was when the OpenAI people approached me. In the spring, right? In my about doing this, this was the sort of the case they made. These sort of results in computational complexity seem like a perfect model of the kind of thing that we want, except with a powerful AI in place of the prover. Okay, now, a difficulty is that we mostly know how to verify programs, when we can mathematically specify which thing we are trying to verify. Right? And the AI being nice to humans, the AI not killing humans. These are really hard concepts to make mathematically precise, right? And that's kind of the heart of the problem with number 6, okay? But, there's also a whole field of formal verification, right? Where you can formally prove the properties of programs. Actually, the CS department here is a leader in formal verification, okay? But again, it pushes the problem to, well, how are you going to formally specify, what property you even want of the AI? Okay, now a seventh idea. You can see there's, like you might feel better if there was only one idea, but instead there are 8, right? Okay, but a seventh idea is, well, we just have to come up with a mathematically precise formulation of what are human values. What is the thing that the AI should maximize that is going to, coincide with human welfare. And in some sense, this is what Asimov was trying to do with his 3 laws of robotics. The trouble is, if you've read any of his stories, they're all about all the situations where those laws don't work, right? So they were designed as much to give interesting story scenarios, as to actually work, right? And what happens when the rules conflict with each other, right? I mean, humans don't even agree with each other about what are the correct moral values. So how on earth can we formalize this? I have to say, like when I have weekly calls with Ilya Sutskever, who's a co-founder of OpenAI. He's extremely interesting guy. But I tell him about some like concrete projects that I'm working on or want to work on, and he usually says like, okay, that's great, Scott. You should keep thinking about that. But what I really want to know is just what is the mathematical definition of goodness? And like, how do you, what's the complexity theoretic for formalization of the AI loving humanity? And I'm like, I'll keep thinking about it. But I'm not. It's hard to make progress there, right? So now, an 8th idea, which some people might consider a little more promising, is, well, if we can't make explicit what all of our human values are, then why not just treat that as yet another machine learning problem, right? So like feed the AI, all of the world's, children's stories and literature and fables and like, and Saturday morning cartoons, right? And they're like, these are all of our examples of like what we think is good and what is evil, right? Now, you go, do your neural net thing, right? Generalize from that, right? Okay, and now one objection that many people raise to this is, well, how do we know that our current values are the right ones, right? Like it would have been terrible to train the AI on consensus human values of the year 1800, right? And said, yeah, slavery, yeah, great, right? So then, this actually, no, that was not a consensus even then, but go back further, right? I mean, and you'll find things that that we now look back upon with horror. Right, so one idea that people have here, this is actually Yudkowsky's term, is called a coherent extrapolated volition, which basically means you would tell the AI, in effect, like, now I've given you all this training data about about current human morality, where human, here are all the human moral judgments, as they currently stand. Now simulate the humans being in a discussion seminar for 10,000 years, right? And trying to refine all of their moral intuitions. And whatever, you predict that we would end up with, those should be your values right now. Okay, so so there are some interesting ideas on the table. Now I wanted to, the last thing that I wanted to tell you about before opening it up to Q&A is a little bit about, well, what actual projects have I been working on in the last 5 months. So I was excited to find a few things where I think they could actually be, or at least some of them could actually be deployed in GPT or in current systems, and they actually address some real safety worry, which and theoretical computer science can actually say something about them, right? The intersection of those 3 requirements looked to me like it might be the empty intersection. Okay, but I was able to find a couple of things. So my main project so far has been a tool for statistically watermarking the outputs of a text model like GPT. Okay, so basically what we want is to have, like whenever GPT generates some long text, then there will be a secret signal in the otherwise trivial choices of which words to use, right? That you can use to later prove that yes, this came from GPT, right? And so it will be much harder to take a GPT output and pass it off as if it came from a human. Okay, so this could be useful for preventing academic plagiarism, obviously, but also mass generation of propaganda by some in some building in Moscow, right? That's a thing that you might want to make harder. Impersonating someone in order to incriminate them, right? That you might want to make harder. Okay, so when you try to think about the nefarious uses for GPT, most of them, at least that I was able to think of, involve somehow concealing GPT's involvement, right? And so you want to make that harder. And so what the idea is just GPT is constantly generating a probability distribution over the next token to generate. Okay, and then as the final step, it selects a sample from that distribution. Okay, now instead of selecting it randomly, you could simply select the token pseudo-randomly, right, using a cryptographic pseudo-random generator whose key, let's say, would only be known to OpenAI, right? And and that shouldn't make any detectable difference to the end user, right? Pseudo-random looks the same. But now what you can do is you can choose a pseudo-random generator that secretly biases a certain score, which you can also compute if you know the key for this pseudo-random generator. Okay, so we actually have a working prototype of this. I've been working with an engineer who built a prototype. It seems to work pretty well empirically with a few hundred words, like a few hundred tokens. That seems to be enough to get a reasonable signal that yes, this came from GPT. You could even take a text like and isolate which parts of the text came from GPT and which parts were written by a human. Now, this can be defeated with enough effort. So for example, if you used another AI to paraphrase GPT's output, well, okay, then we're not going to be able to detect it, right? But if you just insert or delete a few words or just rearrange the order of some sentences, the signal will still be there. Okay, so it's robust against those sorts of interventions, and my hope is that this will be rolled out with the next GPT. And I would like to do something similar for DALL-E, but we don't know if that's going to work yet. So a more recent thing that I started thinking about is there was an amazing recent paper by former colleagues of mine, Shafi Goldwasser, Vinod Vaikuntanathan, and some other cryptographers, where what they have shown is how to plant a cryptographically undetectable backdoor into a machine learning model. Okay, so things like depth 2 neural networks. They can, based on some known cryptographic hardness assumptions, they can plant a secret backdoor. So the model looks just the same as before. You can't, and even a user who can see all of the weights in the neural net, they can't see anything amiss. But there is now a secret input known to the person who trained the network, where if you feed it that input, then it will do something insane. Okay, so it is now known, at least in shallow networks, not yet in deep networks. Okay, but it is now known cryptographically that you can do this. Okay, and so this paper was from less than a year ago, and a lot of people treated it as kind of a lemon. Like this is really this is a bummer if you're trying to do interpretability of machine learning. Because it means, in some sense, it can just be cryptographically impossible to look inside of the neural net and interpret everything that it is doing, right? It can have these planted backdoors that you will never find without solving an exponentially hard problem. Okay, so my proposal was just to turn that lemon into lemonade. Okay, so why not use that as a positive for alignment? So we talked about the difficulties with putting an off switch into an AI, right? So but why not make a cryptographic off switch? Okay, so now you'll when you train your superhuman AI, whatever, you will purposefully put one of these cryptographic backdoors into it, okay, that says if you get this bizarre input, which only the humans know about, then turn yourself off. Okay, then go into a special mode where the humans can control you. Okay, and now the key is this: even supposing that the AI is worried that this backdoor might be there, and even supposing that it can modify its own weights, right? It doesn't know how to remove this thing without just sort of completely rebuilding itself from scratch, which might get rid of a lot of behaviors that it wants to keep, right? So I think that this could actually be tried out in implementation, right? But it's also, I think it opens up all sorts of new possibilities for science fiction stories, right? Like, okay, so now you imagine the humans, what are they going to do with this secret key for controlling the AI? I guess they'll put it in a safe or they'll bury it underground. But now you've got to imagine that the robots are going to be, searching for the key, torturing the humans to get them to reveal where the key is, right? Maybe there's actually 7 different keys that all have to be found, like Voldemort and his Horcruxes, right? So, I think there's a lot of potential here. Okay. And now the third thing that I've been thinking about is this sort of the theory of learning, but in dangerous environments, where if you try to learn the wrong thing, then it will kill you, right? And what can you say? Can we generalize some of the basic results in machine learning to this scenario where you have to consider which queries are safe to make, and you have to try to learn more in order to expand your set of safe queries over time. Now there is one example of this sort of situation that is that is completely formal and that should be immediately familiar to almost everyone here, and that is the game Minesweeper. Okay. So you could think of this problem as sort of Minesweeper learning. Okay, now one thing that it is actually known that Minesweeper can be an NP-hard problem to play it optimally. So we know that in this kind of learning in a dangerous environment, you can get that kind of complexity. We don't know things about typicality, if that would if that could typically be avoided. Also, no one has really proven rigorous bounds on what is the probability that you will win Minesweeper if you play it optimally, right? With a given number of mines, let's say, in a given size of a board, right? I think that would be very, very interesting. I don't know, if it directly feeds into an AI safety program, but it would at least tell you something about the sort of the theory of machine learning in cases where a wrong move can kill you. So that's I hope that gives you at least some sense for what I've been thinking about. And I wish I could end with some neat conclusion, but I don't really know the conclusion, right? Maybe if you ask me again at the end of my in 6 more months, maybe I'll have a conclusion. But for now, I just thought I would thank you, and I'll open things up to discussion. So should I just start taking questions? Or? Okay, great.
Yeah, so I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
First off, could you delay the statistical watermarking of GPT till May of 2026, please?
Why?
Just until after graduation. So the second question I had was, I love when we were talking about the 8 sort of different methods we have to stop a superhuman AI taking over the entire world.
Yeah.
I've recently actually been reading a lot into AutoML and various different techniques for having machine learning algorithms develop other machine learning algorithms.
Okay.
And so I was curious what you thought about how we can possibly implement these different sort of AI safety guidelines inside of systems like AutoML or whatever their future equivalents are that are much more advanced.
So I don't know. I mean, I feel like I should learn something about AutoML first before commenting on that. I mean, it is certainly true that we are going to have AIs that will help with the design of other AIs, right? And and this is one of the main things that feeds into the worries about AI safety, which I should have mentioned explicitly, right? But that once you have an AI that can sort of recursively self-improve, right? Then who knows where it's going to end up, right? It's like launching a rocket into space that you can then no longer steer, right? So so you better or at the very least you better sort of get things right the first time, right? You might only have one chance to get its values right, or get it aligned. I tend to be very leery of that kind of thing, and I tend to be much more comfortable with ideas where humans would remain in the loop, right? So where you don't just have this this completely automated process of an AI improving itself and then improving itself again and so on, but where you are repeatedly sort of consulting humans, and the humans can then query whatever is the latest AI, right? But then they are ultimately making judgments about the next AI, right? So and then if it gets to the point where humans can no longer even judge it, even with as much help as they like from other AIs, then you could say, okay, well at that point, maybe we don't even know anymore, right? What we want, right? What is good or what is not good. But at least until we get to that point, right? I feel like humans ought to be in the loop. Who were next? Yeah.
I feel like most of the protections you talked about today come from like a company, an altruistic human or a company like OpenAI, adding protections in pragmatically. Is there any thought or like any way that you could think of that we protect ourselves from an AI that is maliciously designed or accidentally maliciously designed?
It's a good question. I mean, usually when people talk about such things, they're talking about like using other AIs to defend you against a malicious AI, right? I mean, like if some adversary has a robot army, that's attacking, right? Okay, you're probably going to want your own robot army, right? But which is very unfortunate that you can already foresee those sorts of dynamics. But there is the idea of monitoring, just trying to prevent. I didn't mention this explicitly, right? But this is maybe just like different from any of the things I talked about before. But some people think that that AI development ought to be more heavily regulated or throttled to prevent these things, right? And it's it's not like on the one hand, it's not like nuclear weapons where it's like you have the idea that okay you're going to whoever is building it, they're going to need enriched uranium, right? You can track that, right? And it seems very difficult to do that with software, right? Like who the hell knows what anyone is doing with software. On the other hand, like the one choke point that anyone can think of is GPUs. Right, so for at least the current type of machine learning model, they need huge numbers of GPUs. Okay, right now, a very large fraction of all the GPUs are manufactured by TSMC in Taiwan. Okay, so you can imagine some of the geopolitical ramifications of that. Right, just a few weeks ago, the U.S. passed a bill to restrict the export of GPUs to China, right, which was partly driven by this worry, right, of what will they be able to do in AI if they have unlimited GPU access, right? But then of course if the future status of Taiwan figures into this, right? So you could try to sort of control people's ability to build the systems at all. You could try to at least know if they are doing it, so have a way to register, have something like the nuclear non-proliferation agencies that are at least keeping track of where the powerful AI models are, and which hardware they're running on, right? So that you would keep tabs on things. But those are some of the ideas that people have talked about. I understand that in the EU they're working on some regulatory framework for AI right now, and I don't really know the details of that. You would have to ask someone who understands more about regulation. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
By the way, thanks for coming out and speaking to us. This is awesome.
Thanks.
I'm curious, do you have thoughts on how we can incentivize organizations to build safer AI? For example, corporations that
No.
are competing with each other and focusing on AI safety will make the AI less accurate or less powerful and will cut into their profits.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. You know, I mean, you could worry that you know, all this stuff about trying to be responsible, right? Like as soon as, you know, the bottom lines of, you know, Google and Facebook and, you know, and Alibaba and other major players, as soon as those get seriously impacted, then a lot of this stuff is going to go out the window, right? And you know, people are very worried about that. You know, on the other hand, there are certain things, you know, that like all the major players kind of did adopt this standards, right? So like, you know, a simple example would be robots.txt, right? Like if you want your page to not appear on search engines, you know, you can specify that, and you know, all the major search engines will all respect that, right? And so you can imagine, you know, something like watermarking, right? Like if we're able to demonstrate this and, you know, show that it works and that it's cheap, like it doesn't hurt the quality of the model, it does, you know, it doesn't need that much compute and so on, then, you know, the hope is that this would just become an industry standard, right? And like anyone who wants to be like a, you know, considered a responsible player, right, you know, then they should go and do this as well, right? That would be the idea. But of course you can't, you know, control what everyone does, you know, except maybe via regulation, right? So, you know, and we've already seen this, for example. So DALL-E, as I said before, has all of these filters to prevent people from, you know, in practice it's usually porn, right? But you know, generating things that OpenAI does not want them to generate. Okay, but there is now an open image model called Stable Diffusion, which, you know, in which you can do all of those things, right? And so, you know, you could say in some sense it doesn't matter that much if GPT prevents it, right? But so some of these things really only make sense in a world where there are like a few companies that are at least a few years ahead of everyone else in scaling the models, right? And so those companies have the state-of-the-art models, and they are, you know, like whatever DeepMind, OpenAI, Google, you know, maybe a few others, right? And they are agreeing to be responsible players, right? And you know, if that equilibrium breaks down and it becomes a free-for-all, then yeah, you know, a lot of these things do become harder.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
You mentioned the importance of having humans in the loop
Hmm.
who can judge AI systems
Yeah.
and decide if they should be turned off or deployed or so on and so
Yes.
forth. As someone who could be in one of those pools of decision makers, what stakeholders do you think should be judged?
Oh my gosh. So now you're gonna who do I think should be making the decisions? Well, you know, I mean, you could say, you know, the ideal is, you know, to have some kind of democratic governance mechanism where there is some kind of board or there is some kind of broad-based input into these things, right? And you know, people have talked about this, about how do you create a democratic mechanism for providing input. I can say that, you know, in my personal experience, you know, which is admittedly very limited, right? But just working at OpenAI for 5 months, like they are extremely serious about safety, right? And they have, you know, they actually have this very, very unusual charter that like they're a for-profit company, but they are controlled by a non-profit foundation, right? Which is empowered to, you know, or so they say, to come in and shut things down, or to, you know, hit the brakes if they ever feel that there's a need for that. And they've even explicitly said that if they see that, you know, that there is like a race to get to, you know, superhuman AI against DeepMind or something, that they would merge with the other effort rather than, you know, let that race happen in an uncontrolled way. So so they put, you know, a huge amount of thought into this. That doesn't mean that they're going to get it right? But you know, there are like if you ask me, like, would I rather that it be OpenAI doing this or the Chinese government, right? Or, you know, even, you know, if you ask, you know, would I rather that it be OpenAI or Facebook? You know, I do, I suppose, have an answer to that.
Thanks.
Yeah, yeah.
Dr. Aaronson.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have time for one question.
Oh, all right, yeah.
So I don't know if a question so much as just like a response to what you were doing, but this was a terrifying talk, which was lovely, thank you. But I was thinking like you had 8 things on screen that were sort of like kill switches or remedies in case AI went wrong.
Yeah.
You can imagine a future where like there's a whole bunch of AIs that are being spawned and then responded to in these 8 ways. Wouldn't you sort of naturally select for AIs that are good at getting past like whatever checks we impose on it, and then eventually you could get AIs that sort of are trained in order to pass our tests?
Yeah, no, so I should say, you know, there's a huge irony, right? So Eliezer Yudkowsky, who I mentioned, he has become completely doomerist, right? So he and I have literally switched positions about the value of working on AI safety, right? You know, he used to be gung-ho, I kind of held back. Eliezer is now, in the last year, he has taken the position, it doesn't matter anymore, we're all going to die, okay? 99% probability or more, right? And just, it's all just about now just dying with slightly more dignity. and I'm like, no, this actually seems interesting to work on, right? And so maybe I'm just 20 years behind him, or maybe he just, you know, jumps a little bit too far to some, you know, scenarios that you know, we are very speculative, right? But in general, like no matter what AI safety proposal anyone will come up with, Eliezer has a completely general purpose counter argument to any such proposal. It's like, okay, yeah, but the AI is smarter than that. The AI has already foreseen whatever you just plan to do and has devised a countermeasure that you can't even conceive of because it's that much smarter than you, right? And you know, to me, like at some point, like I'm like, okay, what game are we playing anymore, right? Like if that's just like a general counter argument to anything, then okay, I guess, you know, if it were, then you could say, well, then by definition, yes, we would be screwed, right? Yes, in the world where that counter argument is always valid, then, you know, we might as well just give up and enjoy the time we have left, right? But like you could say, for that very reason, it is more useful to make the methodological assumption that we are not in that world, because if we were, then, you know, what would you do, right? So, you know, you might as well just focus on, you know, the possible futures where, you know, AI kind of emerges more gradually. You know, we have more time to see how things are going and to, you know, to learn from experience, to sort of correct as we go. You know, where like before you get an AI that is like, you know, superhumanly plotting against us and taking over the world, you first get an AI that, you know, maybe it tries to plot against us, but it's really inept at it, right? You know, and it's like any other learning process that we've ever seen. Now, I personally, fortunately, also regard those scenarios as the more plausible ones anyway, right? But even if you didn't, you know, again, you know, methodologically, it would still make sense to focus on them. Should I take or no?
One more.
All right, yeah.
So for your project on watermarking,
Yes.
GPT output, so like in general, discriminating between human and like model outputs, like what's the end game like in the future? Like, do you think it's like an impossible task in the long run, or is it still like just an arm race?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you know, it's hard to you know, to even formalize what the task is, right? Because you could always like take the output of an AI model and rephrase it, you know, using some other powerful AI, for example. Okay, but you know, you could imagine a future where, you know, AIs are, you know, sort of, you know, like you know, there are certain writers, let's say, or speakers who, like, even if they pretended to be even if they wanted to pretend to be someone else, like they couldn't very well, right? They have such a distinctive style or voice that everyone would immediately recognize that it was them, right? And you could try to imagine building AIs in the same way, so that they cannot hide and pretend to be something that they're not. Right? And that it's an interesting cryptographic question, right? Especially if you say, number one, that the model has to be public, right? And people can look at it. And number two, if you say that the means of verifying the model has to be public, right? That can't depend on a secret key. So I don't actually have a good intuition as to who is ultimately going to win. Okay, but I can say certainly these things get a lot harder once, let's say the models are public, once they're not just all under the control of, let's say, the servers of OpenAI or something like that, right? I'm in the current watermarking scheme, I'm crucially exploiting the fact that, that OpenAI has all the server, and so it can do the watermarking using a secret key, it can check for the watermark using the same secret key. Right? In a world where anyone can build their own text model that's just as good, then what do you do there?
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, real quickly before we call quits, you guys can fill out this form right here in the QR code. Just a quick second. It'll be a quick, interesting feedback form. Hold on a second for everyone to get that. On the QR code, like Alex brought up earlier, you'll see that we have an event later today as a sort of follow-up to today's talk, talking about what sort of events we'll be holding at EA at UT Austin related to AI safety. So if any of this interested you or the previous introduction talk, we would highly encourage you to come. And then there also are a speaker event. There's a speaker event offered by EA Austin at Thursday. Again, details are on the screen, and we will send up a follow-up email to everyone here. And with that, thank you all for coming. Thank you to Dr. Aaronson. And we have some food out there, so feel free to have some food too. Thank you.